We're going to open it up for questions for people. Edie has a list of them, and she'll read off the questions and as we go along. Oh, and it was popped up on the thing, another site that has literally thousands of fanzines on it is Bill Burns' efanzines.com, which those are many of them are old, but there's much more of the newer ones from this century online, and it's well worth some great material to look for there. Okay, Edie, ready?
Yes. So what we're going to do is, for all the people that have been posting questions in the chat, I'm going to call your name and ask you to unmute, and then I'll put your picture up so that you can ask your question. And if you don't remember, I'll tell you what your question is. Okay, so Jack Butterworth, are you still here? Would you please unmute and go ahead and ask your question?
Could you tell me what question you're referring to?
You asked about security, physical security for the collections.
Oh, yes. Years ago, a friend of mine who was an artist was at Syracuse University, which had a large collection of Walt Disney original artwork from a lot of silly symphonies, Snow White, etc., 30s, 40s, the really valuable stuff. And he was sitting there looking through things, and he suddenly realized he was sitting there with his artist's portfolio beside him. He was an honorable person. He did not succumb to temptation. But it makes me wonder, a lot of the things that you're collecting uh, that are professionally published have gone up in value a great deal. And I wonder, if you're taking precautions to do that. You don't have to go into detail or anything, but I'm just interested.
So your question is, sorry, the security nature of how we look after these valuable and increasing. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have more than one vault where we keep the really valuable stuff, and Special Collections is very secure. I mean, yeah, we are yeah, I'm trying to I'm trying not to give away too much. Yeah, so we're open 10 till 4 to the public, Monday to Friday. We have cameras everywhere. There are certain people that have access to certain areas, a bazillion keys to various places. We know where things are. So yeah, it's a great question, but no, security is paramount. And it's even, it even goes into things like, if we're doing exhibits, how do we order exhibit cases that are tamper proof? We're constantly appraising those. Every few years we sort of assess that and see if there are any new things that we need to look into. So yes, very, very carefully considered and looked after here at UCR, and I'm sure everywhere else as well.
Okay.
Okay. I would just quickly add, part of your question that's really interesting is that in terms of these prices of pop culture materials, that for the last, I would say easily 10 years, but within the last, let's say 4 or 5 years, the price and the value of just any pop culture materials across the board have soared and exploded. And, pulp magazines is a great example where years and years ago, when I first started, looking at pulp magazines, you could buy most pulps for, $20. You could buy a lot of pulps for $5 a piece if they weren't special issues or didn't have anything special about them. Now I see regularly that even nondescript pulps will go for $200. And I saw in the most recent Heritage auction that for the Weird Tales with the Batwoman on the cover, the last time I looked at the price, the auction hasn't started. I think it's tomorrow, but the pre-auction bidding is already up to $25,000. So in terms of things like the vault, what I've had to do consistently is when let's say my boss sees or hears that a particular pulp or a fanzine or a comic or something, has just sold for some extraordinary price, she'll say to me, "Do we have that?" And I'll say, "Oh yeah, we've got that." "Well, is it in the vault?" "Well, no, not yet." Because if I started to go through over 10,000 pulp magazines, I would be able to it would take so much time and research to see which ones are worth putting in the vault now. Same thing is true for all kinds of pop culture materials. And then when universities begin to engage in auctions, Susan had said, they're not allowed to buy things on eBay. I'm really lucky. I can buy things on eBay. I can buy things from Amazon. I can buy things from rando vendors, and I do. When we do that and we use university money for that, we will very often be paying way more than that thing is actually worth. And then we become complicit in raising the overall price of all of these similar materials. And, this is something that I think has been going on in terms of rare books. Phoenix mentioned RBMS. Well, in the rare books world, universities have been complicit in the pricing of those materials for decades and decades now, because we have those budgets, we have those pockets to be able to buy those kinds of things. So it's something I think about all the time. I'm not sure what the answers are, but I think it's important to realize our own complicity in the way that these prices are just rising and rising. In the past, Jack, they couldn't give animation cells away. They couldn't give them away. Nobody wanted them. And now you see at these auctions, one cell from a Mickey Mouse cartoon going for huge amounts. So
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Lenny, you're next. If you would unmute and start your question, please. One of your questions. You had a lot of them.
Well, I guess the most immediate one that popped to my mind is, does anybody know about what's going on or the progress that's been made with the Lehigh University in Pennsylvania's collections, particularly the recently purchased Robert Lichtman collection, which includes all of the good stuff from the Terry Carr collection that didn't get sent to Riverside? And then I don't know, I might have another comment after that, but I'm wondering, are they cataloged yet? Do they have plans yet to make this stuff publicly available? And are they scanning?
Do you want to go first, Pete? I saw your hand out because I mentioned this in the chat. I know a bit about this. You can go first, so Pete.
I spoke with the librarian that's in charge of this at length a week or so ago. And, they're working on all of this. They're trying to come up with plans for workflows. They are thinking about digitization, but that was something that, when we began to speak about it, she, was talking about things like copyright and all of the challenges to being able to do that. I think it's so great, Lenny, that you brought up this thing that I was just talking about before. You literally just said, "Oh yeah," and all of the good stuff from Terry Carr's collection went there, not the stuff that went to Riverside. This is that whole thing that I was talking about before, where for one reason or another, fans are splitting offers of materials between institutions. And, imagine what it feels like when you're a curator and you've worked with somebody and you've accepted this donation from them, only to find out that the good stuff from that collection went somewhere else. You kind of have to take that stuff in stride, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have its effect, you know? But Lehigh is working on it. They are working on it. They're working on getting all of that stuff cataloged. I can't give you specifics because we didn't get into that. We were mostly talking about the various aspects of it. And then that librarian that's in charge of it is someone that also is doing, a lot of research to try to learn more about what she has, the community, the history behind the fanzines, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Just to build on that. So I think it's Lois Black is the director of special collections that I spoke to. Now, what was interesting, I don't think Lehigh has a substantial science fiction collection, but it is a science and engineering school, I think, was specializing in those. So that's why I think she purchased the collection. I still think there is some good stuff with the Terry Carr art collection, so I'm gonna champion that, of course. Yeah, no, everything else that Pete said rings true. I know that she was planning an exhibit in the first few months of this year. And yeah, it's I guess the short answer is it's a fantastic initial start of a science fiction collection. And we'll just have to see, obviously we've been in contact, we can, those of us who have more knowledge of science fiction or have more established science fiction collections can help, help and collaborate with Lehigh. And then, we'll just see what they do in the future.
All right. Well, I have a comment for Phoenix. Among the stuff that I know that you do have are the paper copies of the secret appas from the 60s, Appa X and Lil Appa, which have a tremendous amount of interesting biographical and commentary information by the people who posted in that. And most of them are now dead. So I don't know what the issue would be with legal permissions over that, but that's something that you might want to consider. That when you're thinking about things that you might want to make available.
No,
And
thank
then
you. I've taken the note. That's really helpful. Thank you.
And then Susan told me that she's going to check on the status of the Steve Stiles collection. And I'm heartily in favor of that because Steve also had an enormous collection of fanzines. And that would be a great resource for people to take you up on the offer to scan things. I actually have a couple of back issues I'm missing that I'd like to get scans of. Oh, and for people that want to access and read old pulp magazines, there is a great website called Luminist, LUMINIST.org, that has an enormous collection of pulps and prozines from the 30s up until 1987. And they say they will gladly take down anything that a copyright holder protests. But I don't know. There are people that won't go to that website because they're ethical and they're afraid that it's an illegal website. But I don't know if any of you are familiar with that and have commentary on that either. But I think it's a great resource for old prozines and pulps.
I go to Luminist and I go to the other sites that have pulps online in their entirety. We're not, I mean, here at Iowa, we're not planning on digitizing any of our pulps, certainly not in their entirety. I have scanned many different individual stories to send to people from pulps. But the thing that I really appreciate about sites like Luminist, and there are, if people are really interested in pulps, there are so many different sites now that have either small numbers of pulps or larger number of pulps on them. But you really want to, I think, try to find the ones where the pulp is there cover to cover. because so much of what's important about reading a pulp is seeing everything, all of the ads, the LOCs, the letters of comment at the back, and the ads tell you so much about who did the publisher imagine was going to be reading this pulp. Yeah. So I mean, I don't have, I come out of punk rock. I was, I was with the band Violent Femmes, the acoustic punk band from the 80s, Violent Femmes, for over 10 years. And I don't have, I don't have the traditional librarian archivist attitude towards all of this. If you want to read pulps and you can't go to some place where pulps are and you're reading Luminist, I don't think that's a mortal sin. No one's losing any money. I I don't see the problem, but I do understand the arguments, and I wouldn't, say it's okay, but it's sort of okay. Yeah.
All
I
right,
pirate
and then, oh,
I
go on.
pirate
I'm
stuff
sorry.
all the time, and I'm really unashamed about it. And I get criticized by fellow librarians and people all the time, and I'm sorry. Sorry.
Phoenix, you had your hand up a minute ago. You don't have to put your hand up. You're on the
Oh, I
panel.
know. I was doing the
Oh, you were clapping.
Um,
Okay.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, no, just echoing what Pete said.
Okay. Lenny, thank you.
All right. All right, and
Yeah,
I
you
I
done?
won't mention the websites where you can read every single issue of every comic book since 1930, and they're all online. But
Well,
you can find those if you're
Well,
industrious.
they're gonna, Lenny, they're gonna put our contact info in the chat later. Uh, would you please send me the link to that site?
All right, as long as you don't turn me in.
I'm not going to turn you in.
wait a minute. Don't make an editing thing for me here. I don't have to cut out part of the Q&A.
Yeah.
If it's a site online, it's a site online.
I'm aware.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
enjoy being able to read every issue of Superman or every issue of More Fun. It's all there.
Okay. Thank you, Lenny. We're gonna take you off the screen here and let someone else ask their question. Tish, you're next. Please unmute and ask your question.
We'll get there yet. Hold on a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Early in the chat, I put up a question about working with people who have passed away, fans who have passed away. And their work will be part of I work mostly in the Star Wars fanzine collections area. And I know several people, unfortunately, who have passed away or have literally vanished. I mean, and I'm a librarian too, so I know how to hunt. I was a newspaper librarian. And some of these people who were very prominent have just vanished. So I know you guys tried to get permission from the authors and the editors, etc. What do you do when you're faced with the estate problem? Or do you even bother?
So, for instance, if you had a collection and somebody writes to you and says, "Hey, we'd like to adapt this for, a short film or something," but you don't have any rights information, they're impossible to track down.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of scenario.
Let me say, Anna, for instance, Anne Zeke, who was a very prominent Star Wars writer of the time, passed away a year or two ago. And I don't know what the publication rights of her books. I mean, if anybody's even bothering,
Yeah.
that's kind of a question.
Yeah. Just from my perspective, and I'm sure others will know more, but that's when you might have to actually go find a lawyer, like a specialist intellectual property lawyer, because I'm not sure if with regards to my job, if we can't find the rights holders, we can't do anything. We can't give permissions for things. We will do the sleuthing as well, like you do. We'll try our best to track down folks. But if we just can't, and again, circling back to the sort of the risk averse nature of university / academic institution legal departments, there is really nothing we can do until we take the next steps to try and find legal counsel as to who might be able to transfer or otherwise mitigate the risk of using those materials.
Okay. Anyone else?
Is that it? Okay. Thank you, Tish.
Susan? No,
Oh,
Susan, did you want to say something? So, what I do all the time is, it depends on what they want. It depends on what the researcher's interested in. If the researcher asks me for a scan of something, and they're professionals, and they want this for a professional project, I let them know up front. I'm making this scan for you of this material for your own personal use and research only. If you use it for any other reason, you may be in violation of the copyright.
Mhm.
I can't give you permission, and you need to seek out the copyright holders. And then that's where we leave it. And if they go ahead and they do put it online, or if they publish it in some way and they get into trouble, it doesn't come back to us because I have told them from the beginning why I was able to give them what I've sent them. And then, the other side of this too is if it's someone, for instance, who's doing something professionally like David Ritter, when we scan things for David, we're not just taking it to the overhead scanner and throwing it on there and emailing him the scan. I send that to our digital preservation department, and that's photographed at the highest resolution. It's done in a way that is perfect for him to be able to publish it. But he knows that I'm not giving him permission to publish it. We don't own the copyright. I'm not giving him that permission. He has to figure that out for himself.
Okay. That's very
And
good.
so
Thank
that
you.
I think is primarily what we do. We do own the copyright on some things.
Mhm.
And we have arrangements with some of our donors so that, let's say, when they pass away, the copyright comes to the library.
Okay.
And then I can give them permission to publish and do all kinds of other things. But in general, no. If we're talking about something like fanzines and digitizing fanzines and putting them online, we have not sought permissions from
Mhm.
anyone involved
Mhm.
because our legal department told us that we didn't have to. As an educational institution who was doing this for research purposes, it came under the heading of fair use. And so we have just gone ahead. And like I say, we've never had any problems. But just so that you know and the audience knows, if anyone, for any reason, would ever ask us to take something down, we would do it immediately. If anyone contacts us and says,
Mhm.
as Joe mentioned earlier, there's something in your collection, and it is a photograph of me when I was 17 years old. I'm naked
Mhm.
and I'm in this fanzine. I want that. I don't want you letting anyone see that fanzine. That is an underage naked photograph of me. And, we just immediately say it's gone. It's
Okay.
not in our finding aids anymore. It's gone. So
Yeah.
we really do our best to comply with copyright and with intellectual property laws as much as possible. But you have to play it, you know, instance by instance, case by case.
Okay. Okay.
I hope that's
So,
helpful.
yes, yes. I mean, that clarifies certain things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tish. Okay, Matt Kelly, you're next. Would you please turn off your mute?
Whoa. Yeah, I had three questions, but I'll try to summarize it as a single question. I'm just curious what kind of efforts have been done to like standardize the way cataloging is done across different institutions so that like there's like interoperability and just better ways that researchers might access multiple collections at once. Like if I'm interested in a specific zine author or title, I could like search one specific portal and it would access all the holdings of any institution that has a specialty in zines.
I can go first quickly because this is an excellent question, a really, really excellent question, but I fear you may not like the answer. So for instance, at UCR, we have several huge fanzine collections that came in at different times and were cataloged by different people. And so even with the unprocessed collections, they're just organized by title, alphabetical. So as Pete was saying, if we get these questions where somebody wants, a thematic search, the digitized resources, I always sound amazing, but at UCR, we don't have that yet. So you just have to know the title and look through them. Now, metadata isn't consistent within our own fanzine catalog collections here, and let alone a sort of institution across institutions. Nowadays we use the Library of Congress standard subject headings, which is sort of the standard cataloging vocabulary. Now, what's interesting, I actually don't do any cataloging in my job here at UCR. I was the cataloger at Liverpool, so there's a whole separate department that deals with that. But I'll give you an example with the Klein photos, the J.K. Klein photos. So there's about 5,000 available online that have some level of description. Now, these first were processed a few years ago before I started, and there was the fan driven, what's what I'm looking for? My brain is dead. Sorry, after 2 hours of talking. Fan inclusive metadata description project whereby we posted them on an online platform. Many of you may have been involved in it, and folks could annotate and say, oh, this is this person, this is that person, and so on and so forth. Now, there was many issues with the outsourced company, I think, that initially were providing the descriptions for those photos, not from the fans, but from UCR's side of things. And so then there was a lot of reparative work to try and clean up the descriptions, make sure the language was consistent, make sure the correct people were identified. And so going forward, we still have thousands and thousands and thousands to process and upload, and the digitization team is actually making good progress in digitizing them. The question is getting the metadata, what level of metadata description for each image to put online, to allow folks, as Pete was saying, to at least know, the date of a convention, who is in the picture. And so we're working on sort of a minimum metadata description of date, title of con, and my colleague Andrew Lippert, a shout out to Andrew Lippert, who's the wonderful processing archivist at UCR, who's been there a bit longer than I have, but he was responsible for sort of checking the metadata for the uploaded Klein photos during the pandemic. So obviously everyone was at home, and then we actually had the time to do the work. And so he's actually made a face catalog of folks to visually identify, who is in the picture. And when the time comes, we are going to be uploading each new collections to Calisphere. But I think in this instance, it was the question of we'd rather have minimal metadata than incorrect metadata. Because learning from the first example of the Klein photos, that causes much more work for everyone, causes bad feeling. And so this instance, we're thinking, okay, well, let's at least provide the minimum metadata and get the photos online so folks can start looking through and commenting and seeing. We can start getting this fan knowledge, like as has been mentioned, it's so precious to get, while folks are still around and seeing these materials. But the short answer to your question is, while there is standard metadata, in materials being cataloged now. In the past, it's not as guaranteed. So this is the challenge of a librarian in our kind of position, is that we have to sort of become familiar with navigating the collections to help outside researchers, given the quirks, the inconsistencies within our own collections, maybe, as well as other, as well as across institutions. So sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but
Yeah. So Phoenix, we've had several people in the chat ask about what cataloging software do you use? Is it homegrown or something
I think it's
available?
archive space. Again, I don't do that side of things. Yeah, I think it's A space, and Aon more broadly. So it's not homegrown. It isn't homegrown.
We use both A-Space and Aon. And what I would add is, I think what you were asking, Matt, is there a way to search for something somewhere and all of the libraries that have that particular thing would come up? And that would be like a way that cataloging would aid researchers in locating things. Was that kind of what you were starting to get at?
That's part of the question, is like
Yeah.
how are the different library catalogs talking to each other and accessible?
Right. So one thing you should know is that though a lot of people, even in the library world, think about catalogers and cataloging as somehow, just the nuts and bolts of librarianship. You need this to lead to access, but it's not exactly curatorial work. What I've learned over the years is catalogers have very clear rules and very clear fields that they are trying to fill with the most accurate information they possibly can about the materials that they're looking at. Okay, having said that, every cataloger has a different style, has a different sort of artistic temperament, and the way that they use those different fields varies from cataloger to cataloger. It will also vary in terms of, are they trying to be really, really inclusive and fill that record with as much information as possible, or are they trying to go as fast as they can? So there's all kinds of things, like Phoenix just said, that affect the final result of whatever thing has been cataloged. I think to answer, the best way to answer this part of your question is to say, are you familiar with OCLC?
Uh, Surface level, not the nuts and bolts of it.
WorldCat. So most people might know this as WorldCat. Other people might know it as OCLC. But basically, this is a place where you can go. And if the thing that you're looking for has been cataloged, when you look for it, all of the libraries that have that particular item should come up in WorldCat or OCLC. They should. Everything, nothing's perfect. But I use it all the time. I think that we all use it all the time. And it gives me, like, if I'm trying to buy something, if I look and I see that only 2 institutions in the whole country have that, yeah, I'm going to be pretty inclined to want to get that if it's something that I think is something that we need. If I look and I see that 27 libraries have that, including libraries that are an hour drive from here, I'm going to be a lot less inclined to buy that. So OCLC is something that might be able to satisfy that kind of a query.
I can just jump in and say what we do. So our fanzines aren't cataloged traditionally in the library catalog yet. I have been working with our catalogers. So they don't have all of the controlled vocabulary and the linkability and compatibility that they should have and could have. Sometimes when that happens, we make our own authority list. So we make our own list of our own terms. And I mean, that might be something great that the consortium that you guys were talking about earlier, if we had a list and they're like nobody's a member of SACO. SACO is how you can get a subject into the Library of Congress terms. We could have our own list and just know, so that if we're all talking about one person, like the Bev Clark, so we can disambiguate between all these different Bev Clarks. So we know which Bev Clark it is we're talking about. We can have a standard form of that name, or if for names it's called NACO. I do a lot of description. Actually, I'm not a cataloger, but I do a ton of metadata. But we're working with our catalogers to be able to get them into the library so that they will be in WorldCat. Currently, they're not in WorldCat. They're in we have like something called Past Perfect because we're like a much smaller, much less resource than my colleagues here. But we are going to be moving to archive space. So the fanzines hopefully will be in the catalog, but we also do have FAPA mailings that we're going to treat like an archival collection. So keep those together.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we have just two more questions, and guys, keep it brief. So first up is Gloria. Gloria, do you want to unmute and ask your
Hi.
question?
So, hey, Susan, it's really lovely to see such an enthusiastic, bright young woman working on these collections. Thank you. My question, Zelazny, can you just, I have limited internet connection, and can you tell me a little bit about what you have in your Zelazny archive? Thank you.
If I could get your email address, I could tell you a little bit more. We don't have subject specialists, so I'm not the archivist. Our archivist would know a little bit more about the Zelazny collection. I would have to look at the finding aid too, and I don't want to waste everybody's time doing that right now. But I'm so happy you're interested, and I will put my email in the chat and would love to get back to you
Thank you.
about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gloria. Linda, you're next. Please unmute.
Sorry about that. I was away for a second. So my question is, I have a bunch of books. I'm not a big autograph collector, but I have books that have been autographed by authors, including Robert Heinlein. And I was wondering if there's a collection of autographed books.
Want to, rain on anybody's parade, but autographs have no research value. So an autographed book is more valuable to a collector. It's more valuable if you try to sell it. But in terms of research value, it has, there's no value there. So I have a collection of about 15,000 books. This is from Al and Brenda Lewis, who have a presence at every big con, all the world cons in the dealer's room. David Lewis, Al's brother, still alive. Al passed away, but David's always there, wheeling and dealing. And 78% of those 15,000 books are autographed first editions. And honestly, it's the books, not that they're first editions necessarily, and not that they're autographed, where the value is. So I don't know how other people feel about it, but for me, it would, the autograph would not influence me to take the book in. The only thing that would influence me to take the book in is if we didn't have it already, and I thought it was an interesting author, and then I'd gamble on it.
And Fred Lerner asks, what about autographs that have information of potential interest, marginalia, or something that would be additional interest? Does that make a difference?
That's different. And yeah, if there's an inscription or if there's more information, if there's something that goes beyond just, eye candy, then that would make a big difference. And you know, now we're getting into, and I think, you know, like Phoenix could speak to this better than I can. When we're talking about books, we're getting into a very different realm, and books have their own sort of, uh, uh, you know, I'm blanking on the right word to use. Books have their own sort of standards when it comes to what makes them valuable, what makes them rare, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, yeah, I guess I'd have to again go book by book by book, author by author.
Yeah, I agree with everything Pete said. Just to sort of follow up on that, yes, if there's marginalia, if there's annotations, anything that shows how the author was thinking, what the author was thinking, is very useful. I processed the Sam Delaney library at Beinecke, and all of that was full of annotations. You know, you could see what he was, not just what he was reading, but what he was thinking. You know, that kind of stuff is very useful. If it's just a case of to so and so, you know, love whoever, yeah, it won't have as much research value in exactly the same way Pete was saying.
Okay. All right. So, Joe, that concludes all the questions. And so I think that I turn it back over to you. And you need to go on, turn off your mute. You're muted. You're still muted. Okay, Joe can't find the mute button. So, if any final comments from people?
There it goes.
There it goes.
Okay. Yes, sorry about that. As we were going along, we've covered an awful lot of different subjects. A lot of it was not necessarily fanzines and such, but I'm glad we did, because collecting is of interest to, well, to most of the people here. Thank you very much for your participation in this. Getting a viewpoint which is somewhat objective at looking at collections is important for many of us, because we've always wondered, well, what are collections worth? Whether or not it's been worthwhile to put all of these things together. And, well, especially since Edie and I and Mark and the other people who have worked on FANAC have been putting in so much work to get some of this stuff available. It helps to know that this is being looked at and preserved in other sources than our ephemeral collections. So thank you very much. I appreciated all of these answers, and I hope we can communicate and work a little closer together as well as we move forward, because, well, we've got what we think is a lot to share, and we know you have a lot to share, so we're just greedy. So thank you very much. We're going to open it. Wait a minute, Pete, you got something?
I've got some eye candy if people want to stick around and see some stuff. It's not much. It's just a few things, but there are a few things that I could show.
So, do you guys have
So
anything you want to show from out of your collection? Did you bring anything? I know Pete
yeah,
brought a couple of
I'm
items.
going to make Pete bigger. So
Okay.
hold on. Sorry, you guys. I'll put you back later.
I just have a couple things. It won't take long. So this is an original sculpture by, and you won't be able to see the initials very well underneath here. That AK refers to the nickname that H.P. Lovecraft gave to Clark Ashton Smith. And this is one of the original Clark Ashton Smith sculptures that are featured in the covers of the Arkham House editions of Clark Ashton Smith's stories. So if anybody has any of those Arkham editions, you look on the covers and you see these different little demon heads. This is one of them. And that's Clark Ashton Smith. This. And again, I know this is going to be hard for you to see. This is The Shunned House. This is the H.P. Lovecraft unpublished. This is the first H.P. Lovecraft's first book, unpublished but printed. This is the little piece of paper that has his address on it. He always wrote his address the same way. That's that little address. They only printed, this was Paul Cook who printed these up right before Lovecraft died. And they printed up about 100 of them. And they wound up eventually in August Derleth's hands. He bound some of them and sold them. This is one of the ones that was never bound, and it was sent to a friend of Lovecraft's. So it's one of the absolute originals of that unbound copies of The Shunned House. This is a really nice, this is the Stanley G. Weinbaum, one of the, really great early science fiction writers. Critics have always appreciated for Weinbaum for creating what they thought was the first truly alien thinking character in a science fiction story. And this is his family's copy of this book. It has the newspaper clippings from his obituary. He lived in Milwaukee, where I'm from. This is a rare photograph that was tipped in of the Weinbaum family. And then the first page of this book, the first page of this book contains a poem that was written by Stanley Weinbaum's father in memoriam. If God in his infinite mercy reunites the spirits of loved ones, then the justification for having lived upon this earth will have been achieved. So that was just a nice sort of family thing. And I actually bought that. I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet. I don't know how that Lovecraft eventually got here. I know how the Clark Ashton Smith got here. That was part of the collection of one of the former heads of Special Collections, who everyone thought and knew was a collector of Henry James first editions. A spectacular collection of Henry James first editions. What no one knew was that he was a secret science fiction and fantasy fan, and that he had an enormous collection of first editions of Clark Ashton Smith, Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, on and on and on. This, from our media fan collections, this is a seashell, and the top of it has been carved away to reveal a Klingon bird of prey. And it's just a magnificent job of carving. And I'm always thinking, in terms of fandom, I'm always thinking about the amount of time and energy that fans are pouring into their hobby. And this is a good example of that. Another example, a great media fan who's still alive, Barbara Wenck, who I knew by another one of her names, Gennaro Wenck, sent us a fantastic collection. And in that collection were Starfleet Academy class rings. So Gennaro told me that when she and her sister were really young and they were really prominent Star Trek fans, one day they were sitting around and said, you can buy Starfleet Academy diplomas from Gene Roddenberry. Wouldn't it be great if we had class rings? So they actually contacted the largest class ring company in America and asked them if they would make Starfleet rings. And they did, and they got these two for themselves. And I looked into it and I found out that that company, which makes all of the high school and university rings in the country, still is selling Starfleet class rings. So if you want to get one, you can still buy one. And this is the last thing. Same woman, Gennaro Wank, in an email, going back and forth over years. In an email, she said to me, yeah, and you know, another thing I've got, I have original ears worn by Leonard Nimoy in the first iteration of the Star Trek series. They were given to me by a staff member at the like first or second Star Trek convention. And then she didn't say anything else about them. Well, you know, I had to write back and say, okay, I understand. You're not sending, with everything else you're sending us, I wouldn't expect you to send us Spock's ears. But, you know, if you ever need a good home, just remember that you have all this other stuff here in Iowa. She immediately emailed me back and said, oh, no, no, no. Why would I even bring it up if I wasn't going to send them to you? So the boxes, you know, start to come, and I'm going through boxes and I can't find Spock's ears. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. At the last minute, she decided these are too precious. She's going to hang on to them. And then I spotted at the bottom of the box, I spotted this Barbie coin purse, which is also vintage. And I could tell by the full skirt of the picture that this was probably from the 60s. So, you know, I hadn't even opened it yet. I looked it up. I saw that it was worth about $100, and I thought, okay, well, that's nice. That's nice. It's not science fiction. It's not Star Trek, but it's pop culture. It's fantastic. And this was way before the Barbie movie. So, you know, it was nice. When I opened up the coin purse just to look inside, that's where Spock's ears were. And these are, so I just recently learned that the Lily, you know, we talked about competition. There's no competition. I heard that the Lily had a pair of Spock's ears, and I was immediately, you know, outraged that we weren't the only institution with Spock's ears. And then someone who worked at the Lily came to work here and said, no, no, no. The Spock's ears that they have are like plastic commercial things. These are made out of the cheapest foam you can imagine. And after doing some research, what I found out was they made these by the dozens. And Leonard Nimoy would go on set, and the heat from the lights of the set would start to melt them to his ears. So they'd have to cut, they'd take those off, they'd slap on another of these cheap foam ears, and then they'd blend the makeup back in. But if they were in the middle of shooting, if it was towards the end of the day, sometimes they didn't blend the makeup in enough. So if you're watching the original Star Trek, and you have to really just pay attention to Leonard Nimoy all the time, you will see these moments when his ears, when you can see a line and you can tell that the ears are really fake. Anyway, that was just a little eye candy that I'd thrown together, and I appreciate everybody letting me show you. Thanks.
Okay. We don't have any curiosities to show you from our collection, and you wouldn't want to see them anyway. But thank
Would-
you all again.